adaptive immunity. Okay, we know immunity, okay, this is just the body response in order to fight the pathogen that enters the body. Okay, so now immune system, it is colored by immune cells. Okay, these immune cells, they can be classified like the cells that can play part in innate immunity, and also adaptive. And in this discussion, we're going to consider adaptive. So what really is adaptive? Adaptive immunity, this is the immunity which is mediated by the lymphocyte cells. Okay, so the adaptive immunity is only by the lymphocyte cells. It is the one. Basically, it is the B cells and the T cells. So now, for you to understand how adaptive immunity has to work, adaptive immunity can't work on its own without the innate immune system. First, the innate response, it has to start first. So meaning, we need to understand what are the cells that is under innate. So when we talk about innate, examples of cells mostly are antigen presenting cells. These antigen presenting cells. These cells are like a neutrophils. There is macrophage. There is dendritic cells. Dendritic cells. These are, and also B cells. They are antigen presenting cells, but these B cells, they are not classified as the cell for innate immune response. So now, how is the adaptive immunity work? First, there must be the antigen presenting cell. Okay, so in this case, we are going to consider the macrophage. So when there is a pathogen in the body, when there is an antigen in the body, when there is a foreign particle in the body that can stimulate the immune response, meaning these cells of the innate, such as the macrophage, will recognize that pathogen. After recognizing the pathogen, it will engulf the pathogen. After engulfing the pathogen, okay, or phagocytose, it will phagocytose it. Then it will let this pathogen into itself, into the cell. It will enter the pathogen by phagocytosis. After phagocytosis, this pathogen or the antigen will be processed. Okay? After it being processed, then this pathogen will present the macrophage will present the fragment of the pathogen or the peptide or its part of it after it has been broken down inside it. Then this macrophage will present this where? So these macrophages, they have got proteins on its surface that is being expressed. This is the major histocompatibility. Okay. Okay, so under major histocompatibility, there are two classes. There is major histocompatibility class 1 and major histocompatibility class 2. So basically, this major histocompatibility class 1, it is expressed in antigen presenting cells, meaning the B cells has this type of major histocompatibility 2. It's 2, not 1, it's 2. Major histocompatibility 2. It is the protein that is expressed on the surface of antigen processing cells. Okay, the function of major histocompatibility, it is to present a foreign particle or a processed antigen to the adaptive immune cells, such as the the T lymphocytes, so that when this is being presented to it, then the T lymphocytes can now become activated. After it has become activated, it starts producing cytokines, of which those cytokines too, they activate the macrophages and the B cells, all those things. So you need to know the antigen presenting cells. So the antigen presenting cells that we have the neutrophils, macrophages, the dendritic cells. Okay, their role, it is to pick immediately the pathogen enters the body. The antigen cells are the one that picks up the pathogen, then engulf it by phagocytosis. After engulfing it, it then kills it, the antigen there, process it, and produce the fragment of it as the evidence showing the T cells. So, T cells cannot become activated on its own, but it can only become activated when the antigen is being presented to it by the antigen presenting cell. But the B cells can become activated on its own. It has got the ability to recognize the pathogen on its own and proliferate on its own. Also, it has got the ability, when the cytokine is being produced from the T cells, it can also proliferate. That's the good thing about it, B cells. So now we are talking about major histocompatibility 2. What about major histocompatibility 1? This major histocompatibility 1, this is the protein surface that is found on the host cells. These host cells. So this major histocompatibility, just in general, without considering class 1, class 2, that's the major histocompatibility. Its law is to present the antigen, the foreign body, the particle, the peptide of the pathogen to the what? To the T lymphocyte. So in this case, when you talk about 1, it is mostly expressed by the host cell. Now, how possible? Because the host cell, these are the cells of our body. These basically are the cells that become infected with the viruses and also tumor cells. These cells, when they are affected by viruses, they process the virus inside it and they present the pathogen or the peptide or the part the fragment of that virus through using major histocompatibility 1, which is MHC1. This is for the host cell. So now, here, for 2, I talked about that MHC2, it is recognized by T cells, but specifically T helper cells. That's the one that recognizes MHC2. It is the T helper cells. But the type of T lymphocyte that recognizes MHC1, it is the T cytotoxic cells. So T cytotoxic cells, they recognize the antigen expressed by MHC1. So whenever there is the appearance of MHC1, the T cytotoxic, they sense that. And after sensing that, there is the interaction between this MHC class 1 and the receptor of the T cytotoxic. They bind together. After binding, then the T cytotoxic, it starts to produce granules that kills that infected cell. So this is adaptive. But now, the difference that you need to understand about adaptive immunity. Adaptive immunity, it has got the capacity of storing some cells that are known as memory cells for other use. So when T cells, B cells, okay, when the B cells and the T cells become activated, they proliferate, they multiply. So now, as they multiply, they form 2 types of cell. One, it is the memory cells. And the other one, it is the effector cells. So remember, why are we only talking about B cells and T cells? Because we are talking about adaptive immunity. Adaptive immunity is only mediated by lymphocyte cells. So when the B cells become activated, they proliferate. Also the T cell, when become activated, they proliferate. Let's say this is the T cell, okay, and this is the B cell. After this B cell, it has encountered with the pathogen. This pathogen, it is being processed inside the cell here. It is being processed inside the cell. After it has been processed inside the cell, then it presents the fragment here, okay? After presenting the fragment to T cell, the T cell bind the MHC2. It is MHC2 because we are talking about the B cell. Remember, a B cell, it is the antigen processing cell. After the binding here, this causes this T cell to produce cytokines, okay? Cytokines. These cytokines, they in return also affect the same B cells, and this B cell, they proliferate in number. These cells proliferate. Understand? So these numbers of proliferation, they are similar to this type of B cells, meaning the receptors that this has also are the same that these cells are being produced. Also, after these cytokines are produced also, this meaning it has become activated. It will also cause to activate other macrophages, other immune cells, and also to cause itself, the T cells to be activated and proliferate. Let's say these are another T cells being proliferated. Remember, this is not the other T cell type with different types of receptors. These are the T cells of the same type that have been proliferated. Now, when these are being proliferated, we can say that let's say these they are 7 and these they are 6, meaning these 3 can be used as effector cells, meaning these they can work there and then to fight the pathogen, but this one can be stored, can be left without working on that pathogen, but can remain as the memory B cells, so that if the similar pathogen that caused this B cell to proliferate enters the body, can work on it. So this one means as the memory, then this one means that effector that works there and then to neutralize the pathogen. Also for this one can remain as effector. The memory cells. This one as effector. This one can be stored, can't be used there and then, but can remain to be memory cells so that it can be used for another time. But this one can work there and then. So that's how the name adaptive immune system, meaning after the encounter, so meaning when the pathogen enters here, this one engulfs, become activated. So meaning this process after the first entry of the pathogen, this one encounters, become proliferated into memory and effector. For the first time, this is the first time the pathogen is entering the body. So this is known as the primary response, because it is the first time. And this primary response, the duration can be slightly higher. And the person can have symptoms in response to this, such as fever. But when the pathogen tries to come again, the same pathogen, into the host, it will find these memory cells. These memory cells, they now work on this pathogen because it was already proliferated and stored. So this is now the secondary response, which is the secondary response. Secondary response, primary response. So the duration by which this one would work on this pathogen, it is very short. So that's why it was now adaptive. When the second enters, it will find that there is already memory cells there. The B cells were already adapted to the same pathogen. That's why it is referred as adaptive immunity. So this is how adaptive immunity works. The first encounter, it is known as the primary response. After the primary response, that's where now the B cells produces effector cells and the memory cells. That's where the T cells produce the memory cells and the effector cells. The secondary response, that's where now the same pathogen enters and finds the memory cells. So since it finds the memory cells, there's no need of wasting time like the processes. It quickly kills this pathogen. So this is what is under adaptive immunity. Remember the cells. They are the cells of the lymphocytes for adaptive, but for innate, it is the phagocytic cells, but exclude the B cells. because the B cell is also phagocytic, but include all the phagocytic cells, but remove the B cell, because the B cell, it is under the adaptive immune system.